Welcome to Candybar, Antlerboy, a series where I, Mike Rapin, discuss the Netflix original series Sweet Tooth with the one and only IRCB regular Danny.
Hey Mike, how you doing?
Every week, we'll be discussing one episode of the TV series and chatting about the comic of the same name by Jeff Lemire, originally published by Vertigo Comics. Let's get into the show. Danny, I'm so excited. We're back. Episode 3, I guess Season 2, Episode 3. Episode 11, Chicken or Egg, 50 minutes long, 29 seconds. I don't know why I feel the urge to keep that in our show, but it's a thing. I guess before we get into our discussion, this is spoilers for episode 11 of Sweet Tooth, season 2, episode 3. If you haven't watched it, press pause, go watch it, come back, listen to our discussion. Danny, how are you feeling after episode 11 today?
Mike, I really like this one. I think the last episode we talked about left us a little bit wanting. But I feel a lot better about this one. I think the season overall is kind of ramping up still. But at least this one gives us a little bit more insight into some of the past. While trying to move, and I do say trying to move some of these storylines forward. But we'll get into all that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like you and I have interestingly different vibes about this episode, but let me give a quick summary for those of you at home who don't remember the episode. This episode has a couple of threads. This season seems to be like, hey, let's just move as many threads along their chain as much as possible, and throw you back and forth between them. But in this episode, we had Gus and Sing investigating Fort Smith to find where they found an alligator hybrid kid his name was Peter, which is, we'll get into it. And that ends with them discovering Birdie, aka Gertrude Miller's work with chickens and the reveal of Gus's debut on the world. Jep and Amy head to a town called Factory Town, try to recruit folks to free Gus, and Abbott, of course, for some reason, shows up to recruit people with the promise of a cure to the great sick. Bear and her handsome friend journey a bit and end up enlisting with the last men for very different reasons. And the kids find out that Roy didn't escape, but was killed. So right off the bat, we get a flashback with this episode. Project Midnight Sun. Where was your head at the beginning of this episode, Danny?
I mean, as soon as we saw flashback, I was very excited because I definitely want to know more about. I like seeing the world prior to the big sick and everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And this was kind of a good way, because I think I want answers right after a season, and almost we're almost at the halfway point of the season, which is weird.
I know.
So I want some answers, especially because after the conversation we've had, because you have read the book, like every time you don't say anything, but I can, as we're having this conversation, I can see that there's the gears are turning in your head, right? And there's little things happening. So I was very excited when we started with a flashback, and then as kind of things unfold throughout the episode.
Yeah, man, I finding out more. See, this is the thing that's interesting about this show is like Jeff Lemire clearly had something going on with what he was thinking about for this book. And if I remember correctly, the book is still wishy-washy in the end as to like what the cause was, because the point of the book is not like what caused these hybrid kids, what caused the sick. All of those things in the comic are kind of this motive to show like one kid's journey into becoming who he becomes. We'll say what that is for later, I guess, when the show ends. Maybe we can do like a full big spoiler review and discuss. But and Danny, I'll get you to actually read the comic once the show's done. Then we'll do like a big compare and contrast. When Candybar, Antlerboy, or Sweet Tooth is ended in 2029 or something like that.
So speaking of that, as we were watching these episodes, I saw on Netflix that they have a little banner that says final season coming. Like it's been announced. So that I think we're only getting 3.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, this kind of goes back to our discussion that we had last week, where I was like, you know what, if we're going to accelerate this pace, I am not against that at all.
Mm-hmm.
There's some stuff that I think works really well in the comic. I will say Sweet Tooth kind of suffers from what I call vertigo syndrome, where like there are these long running books, like Why the Last Man. I think Sandman also fits this. Transmetropolitan, books that came out in this weird era of like, hey, we're just going to keep these books ongoing and they're independent, they're selling well. But they have these arcs that you're kind of like, if you cut that out of the book, and then just plopped everything back together, it would be fine. And Sweet Tooth the comic suffers from this. There's a whole bit about travel and people and all this stuff, and maybe we'll see that at the end of the season based on where things are going. But I feel like they're accelerating the story in this in a lot of ways, and but they're also giving us like more lore to play with, because I think unlike a comic, you can't really be as wishy-washy in television. I think people want their answers. And of course, you and I think are on this of the same mind. Like, I want to know how this works. I'm rarely one of those people that's like, give me the backstory for this whole thing. And it's like, no, I kind of want to know because it's so intriguing and it feels like it's central. The show has made it feel like the birth of hybrids, the origin of the sick, whatever Birdie's doing up in Alaska are central things that we need to uncover as the series goes on. And if we don't get those answers, I think, you and I at least are going to riot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was nice to get the flashback this episode.
And I mean, and the information that came from the flashback, right? Like the whole conference that we get to experience and see, and what was the goal of whatever they were working on for this project Midnight Sun, which
Yeah.
like it feels very noble, but the way it was set up, I'm like, well, this is just like big pharma trying to do their
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
right? But
If you're rich enough, you can live forever. That's
yeah,
essentially what it was,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Like, let's go take this stuff from all these people that have been living their lives one way and just steal all that. But um the reveal, I guess, that Gus was an egg baby, I mean, it really fits
Mhm.
into all the stuff that they, because somebody mentioned in one of the episodes that he didn't have a belly button, and
Yep.
like, so we know that but the fact that he was actually born in a little egg, like all that stuff was, and then when they pull out the baby Gus, like it looks really adorable, right, with the little
Oh, yeah.
horns, and so
Oh, yeah, the little nubbins on his
yeah,
head,
yeah,
like, come on. I mean, that's the thing this show keeps doing, and I feel like every time they put the kids on TV or on the show that's not Gus, I'm just like my heart like triples in size. I'm
yeah,
just like, oh no, no, no! If anything happens to any of these kids, it's over. I'm done with this show. Um, but I guess we should rather than like I would love to just vamp about these kids all day, but we should talk a little bit more about some of the other stuff that happens this
sure,
episode, right? Because we had the big reveal at the end of last or at the end of at the end of last episode that what happened to Roy, right? And now we're here and Gus is essentially like shunned from these other kids. But fortunately, you know, we see a little bit of like Dr. Singh kind of going crazy in this episode, and he gets to pull he gets man, am I getting the episodes mixed
I
up?
think so. I think you may be getting a little ahead of yourself.
Oh, I am getting a little ahead of
So,
myself. Sorry. Uh, This is the problem with this show is that Gus keeps leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. I'm just like, which time was it this time? Anyway, so Singh grabs him and they're like, we're gonna go investigate this lab. And
mhm.
I thought that was probably some of the coolest bits that we've seen so far of this season. Like, whatever happened to the real world, right? Like we've seen the ramifications and how people have coped with it, right? Like Abbott's people are a manifestation of that. Whatever these other warlords that are out there are a manifestation of how people have survived, right? Like the animal army and stuff. But here we get to see like an almost undisturbed piece of time, kind of frozen, still destroyed because clearly the last men went through this place. But it was interesting to see Gus and Singh experience the world from their separate perspectives, right? Like Gus, this is all brand new to him.
Yeah,
Um, and Singh is just like, oh my god, like there's so much here and it's all gone. Like this could have saved everyone if only they'd known, right?
right. Yeah, no, I definitely, I love the sequence of Gus walking into and like realizing the light, how they work, like the motion sensors and all this stuff, like him running
Yeah.
around, and even though he's being escorted by this one of the last men in Dr. Singh, like he's never seen all that stuff, right? He's always never explored. This is probably the most technologically advanced place that he's ever been to. And
Mhm.
then to Dr. Singh's point, like this all feels like hope to him because that's ultimately what he's searching for.
Mhm.
So I also do really like, there's a shot right before they walk in where someone or something's looking at them through the window. So like they're already preparing
Yeah.
the audience for a little reveal later.
Oh man.
Which I thought it was gonna be a lot darker. And I guess it kinda is, but not in the way that I was expecting it to be dark. Um
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and I mean about that reveal, right? We end up finding this alligator kid named Peter, which I wrote in my notes, maybe the most awkward costume I've ever seen because like we all know what alligators look like, and they are not vertically inclined beings, right? They're flat, you know.
Yeah.
So to see this kid walking around with his arms and legs, but he's got this alligator head that's just bent over at like a 90-degree angle. All I could think of was the giant crocodile clock from the movie Hook.
Mm.
I don't know if that's ringing a bell to you, for
Yeah, yeah.
anybody, but
Well,
um,
I mean,
yeah.
obviously, I don't know what a, alligator looks like because I wrote in my notes crocodile hybrid. Uh,
Oh, I
so,
mean, alligator, crocodile. I mean, it's the same
so,
shit, right?
but yeah, it was interesting because I wasn't sure like how. I guess I didn't put together immediately that it was a child, right? I
Oh
just
yeah,
thought it was
totally.
something that was at the lab. I thought it was a creature that they had at the lab until Peter stands up on two legs and starts running around. And I really like that Gus was the one that he's already met other hybrids that he knows that they can't speak fluently like he can, and he didn't. They may not
Hmm.
even have as much you know cognitive skills as he does. So like the fact that he wanted to take the time to maybe talk to Peter and engage with him, I thought that
Hmm.
was really like it feels like Gus is growing a little bit and learning from his experiences with the other kids.
Yeah, this is the thing that the show keeps hammering home. I think is, Gus is this connective thing between humanity and these hybrid kids, and I think like, there's a moment where I kind of feel like there was maybe a logical leap made that I didn't track, or I missed something where Gus is like, no, 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 I can speak to him. And it's not like he's speaking a special language or
Hmm.
anything. He just is able to like communicate with this kid. Which like broke my heart. Like honestly, this is the problem with this whole show is
Yeah,
every time they mistreat one of these kids, you're just like, no, you sons of bitches, it's just a child.
yeah,
Like, because especially, we hear people talking about these hybrids as monsters. I think they talked a lot about that in the previous season, and like the whole last men treating these kids like absolute dirt just because. I mean, it's heartbreaking, and they're just sweet little children who just want to live. It's so frustrating as an audience member, but like that's written like that intentionally, right?
yeah,
Um, so yeah, that moment is like really frustrating and tragic because eventually, they're Gus is chasing this kid around, and then he kind of settles him down, and then finally the last men show up, and it's just all hell breaks loose for that moment. But it leads us to this next moment where we end up getting Gus and Sing find this video of of Gus's mom, which like, oh my god, this kid should be paid $1 million an episode because the way he can sell just loving his mom with a face, with just looking at a TV screen. Oh my god, I was in shambles. Couldn't even believe it. So good.
yeah. No, that was those were also very good uh scenes as Gus just kind of shows you that through the very little emotion, just like you said, just a look. Like he has a really
Hmm.
good way to emote when he's amazed and when he's feeling. I mean, really, any feeling that he's feeling. Gus's range of feelings has really expanded since season one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but also, I think Doctor Singh, like the hope that he has as he realizes that there's all this stuff, like he tells everybody, like, you got to pack all this stuff up, and then he makes the deal with Gus, and they take Peter back, and so like everything is kind of working out because he's also on a deadline.
Yeah, we're still in that 3-day window, right? Because
Yeah.
Abbott left and he said, "When I'm back, you better have a cure."
Hmm.
And of
Hmm.
course, at this point, Singh is convinced that this is the way that he can find that cure. Which like, man, putting all your eggs in one basket, like it's a pun because there's
Yeah.
chickens. If you watch the episode, I'm making a pun. Uh but still, it's a pretty massive long shot, but at this point, right, he's desperate. Even with the whole, potential like temporary like solution that he's come up with
Mm.
by extracting something from these hybrid kids. Um, yeah, it's still like he's desperate, to not only save his wife, but I think he's at this point also like trying to save the human race. I think the desperation is setting in and it's closing in all around him. Um,
Yeah.
so I think, and the last line that I wrote down that Gus said, he's like, "If you hurt Peter, I'm never helping you again," which to me is like, I love seeing Gus stand up like this.
Mhm.
Like, and I know he's tried to make stands and he's tried to be the big tough kid a couple times, but I feel like the more he gets put into this like leadership, this person of importance position, he starts to recognize it. the stronger he feels like he can actually like push back against the adults who seem to want to fix everything or seem to want to control him, but have no idea what they're doing. Where he may be actually better to take care of himself than them. You know?
Right. Yeah, I think Gus has proven that at this point he's not only looking out for himself but also for the group because he knows he has to, right? I think that was his intention with telling the lie about Roy, and
Hmm.
obviously
Hmm.
it doesn't always work out. Like it didn't work out for his dad either, right? When he told him all those like the lies. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
we'll see how Gus handles that going forward as well. I mean, there's going to be consequences to it, and we'll definitely get into it later on.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, meanwhile, we've got Jep and Amy who are heading to this factory town, is what it's called. Which I was like, what a goofy name for something, but sure. Um, and it's a free city, so Abbott isn't allowed. I think is the quote that I wrote down, which is funny, because minutes after they show up, Abbott shows up.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing about this episode is it jumps around a lot. And I think we found that, like in all these episodes, while the party is split, they're just going to keep jumping left and
hmm
right. I found it a little jarring in this episode in particular because I just wanted the Gus and Sing stuff, and I quite honestly couldn't care about Bear or even Jep and Amy in this episode. But yeah, still, I guess let's just with the Jep and Amy stuff. Like, it's interesting to see how the people of this free town who are apparently living it up, like freedom, apparently suits human beings pretty well because they've got a bar and they've got a trading station and they've got all this really nice amenities for living a life in a basically dystopian future.
yeah.
Um, and but as soon as Abbott shows up and he's touting, we need to kill all these hybrids. These kids are like, finally, let's do it. It's like, oh my gosh, calm down with the bloodlust.
They very quickly. I mean, and Abbott put on a show for sure for them,
Oh
right?
sure, yeah,
Um, with I also feel like the people of the town, like they didn't ask for enough proof to me. Like, if you're gonna cure one of my people, I
oh
want to
yeah,
see them be healthy. Don't just inject them with something and then like like his hands stop shaking. Which I it was funny as they were walking in. Amy and Jeb were walking into the town. Like they checked the pinkies and stuff to make sure it was
yeah,
not trembling. And that's kind of how they keep. That's how they that's their how they keep the sick away. But yeah, if you're
hmm
gonna heal somebody from our town, like I want to see them through. Like before I trust you and before I follow you, why would I give up all this freedom if you don't? If you, I mean, you could just be selling me snake oil, right? So
oh yeah. I think that's literally what I wrote in my notes was like it was a snake oil salesman pitch, right? You bring up someone from the crowd, you cure them temporarily, and then like walk him off stage. And then as soon as he gets off stage, he's like, put him in the van. Like the guy
right,
gets shoved into a trunk, right? And here's the thing, like, the thing that I found interesting about The Last of Us when I watched that was like 20 years have passed. And so the world is a little bit different, right? In this show, it's been 9 years, and it seems like every piece of civilization has fallen apart. People who were 20 are now 30 in this show, and they seem to have forgotten how medicine works in all capacity or something, unless it's painkillers, in which Jep is very, very aware of how those work, right? But yeah, it's kind of wild that they would just like let that guy disappear and go, oh, he's cured, hooray! Let's all
yeah,
like give away all of our predispositions to like be
mm,
cautious and just like go crazy, right? It's such a wild idea.
yeah. And another thing I really liked about this sequence is that I realized the reason Abbott seemed to be such a intimidating villain in the first
Hmm.
season was because we saw very little of him. But the more that he's on screen and the more that we learn about him, like all that persona just kind of starts crumbling and you start seeing the cracks. And
Totally.
like he's just a charlatan. And I think his only semi I wouldn't even say redeeming quality, just the fact that we found out earlier that his brother is his second in command.
Hmm.
Like I don't know, maybe that could be at least one saving grace, but overall, like he's just he's just a phony, and I can see why the other people that he wanted to meet with, like they're just denying him that because they can see past all his lies, whereas all these people, he puts on a good show.
Totally. I mean, it's all propaganda, right?
Yeah.
The thing that this group, see the last men, have is they have like the tyrannical propaganda side really, really working for them, right? Like the big flag with Abbott's face,
Yeah.
and there we see Bear in what's his name, the pretty boy. Is his name Jordan? I feel like his name is Jordan.
We can call him
Um,
that. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Saved by the Bell, that's what I'm gonna call him. So, Bear and Saved by the Bell, when they're walking before they go to the recruitment center, to get recruited by the last men after a series of bits and pieces of conversation, a train drives by as they're walking, and they pick up all this, like, supplies
Yeah.
that are like, "Oh, it's food and candy and all this other stuff," and they have these flyers for, like, "Join the last men," and they've got
Mhm.
this beautiful, like, well-crafted, piece of propaganda. Um, and that's their whole thing, and it's like, we haven't seen that from any of the other like factions or warlords or whatever. Like even the animal kids or the animal army, they weren't really like a thing. They were kind of just like a ghost story in a lot of ways.
Right.
Um, so yeah, they definitely like the Last Men have that going for them. They got the branding, like literal branding on people's chests. They've got the like the flag and the iconic logo and stuff. So it's definitely a thing that's maybe that's like how they keep their pressure. I mean, like most like tyrannical leaders, like they're constantly on the verge of self destruction.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the violence that they could inflict upon people. So I think the last thing I wanted to bring up around like Jep and Amy is, we see there's like a lot of paranoia between the two of them. I can't believe that I could trust you. I just met you a day ago, which I keep forgetting that like they only met like 48 hours
Right.
ago in the
Right.
show, but it's been like 2 years for us. Um, and so, it's interesting. Like Jep he's so focused on fighting, and like it seems like all he wants to do is like, we need to build an army. We need to get all these people. We need to overrun this stuff. He's thinking along the same lines that the last men are thinking. Meanwhile, Amy's like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a smarter way to do this. And then, of course, like 2 seconds later, we switch to there's this woman who's waiting for a phone call, and she's kind of she's going a little bit wild at Amy, who wants to use the phone. And Jep offers up this extremely sincere like hug and this moment of like tenderness that like again, crazy 180 sometimes with these characters. I don't know who's writing this show, but we need to ease into some of this stuff. Right?
Yeah, I think their story was just all over the place. They get to the factory town, and the people that Jeb was looking for, they're dead.
Mhm.
Like they're literally go visit them at their cemetery, and then they go to
Yeah.
this bar where nobody's charging for anything. I don't know how the economy works in this town. And then yeah, like this lady kind of flips out on Amy, and then we learn, right? We learn that she's been waiting for a call for like 9 years, and that was
9 years.
oh, this show just like when you're not expecting an emotional punch, like it just throws like a little jab in there. But then
I
yeah,
know.
Jeb kind of it feels a little out of character for Jeb because I don't think we've ever seen that side of him. So
Yeah, I mean, he's only really ever been soft with Gus,
right,
right? And I say soft is a weird word, but I feel like tender is maybe the more correct word,
yeah,
right? He's only really been tender with Gus after he kind of got over his "I'm a big bad badass" shtick last season, which were some of the like most heartfelt moments in the show as far as I'm concerned. And so like this season, it felt like he was back to square one because he's with this new person, Amy. He's got to put his elbows out. He's got to be the big tough guy. And then there's this moment of tenderness kind of out of left field, but I think they needed to add a way to find, or they needed to find a way for Amy to trust him because her whole like paranoia, I'm not going to go outside stuff. Like I forgot that was like her whole character last season.
right,
And she keeps bringing it up, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, can we just slow down with the paranoia? I barely want to go outside right now. Come on.
right.
Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of what it was, but it did feel pretty like it was a pretty harsh like we only got to kill these people versus like, don't worry, sometimes you just need a hug.
Yeah,
But I guess like so, Amy and Jep, their whole thing is they're gonna make this phone call. And I think by the end of the episode, we hear like, oh, the phone's ringing. Right, that's kind of like the end of that story. And then the last bit is Bear and this guy Saved by the Bell. That's what I'm calling him. And it's like a story that just needed to be there because we needed to put Bear in the episode, right? It kind of felt weird, right?
yeah. So that's actually, I mean, and we kind of touch on the things that we liked and did not like as much in this episode. At the beginning of my story, I mean, at the beginning of my notes, I wrote, "Oh, we're gonna get the epic tale of Bear," and we did not. That did not pay off for the like. They really set it up as if they were gonna tell us about this whole journey she was about to go on, and that didn't happen. All that happened is that she just learned that these people are also as brainwashed, uh,
Mhm.
as everyone else is gonna be from General Abbott. So yeah, unfortunately, that did not pay off. So hopefully the show can course correct with her character because
Mhm.
we kind of know her singular mission is to try to get to Gus as well, which is really
Yeah.
everyone else's mission. So like the fact that they split them up feels very weird. Hopefully they'll
I
reunite soon.
know.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, the pace of this show is really picking up, so maybe that'll happen sooner rather than later.
Right. And it kind of makes sense. Like we need to get Bear needed to go experience the real world so that she could find a reason to come back to Gus. Like in a way that wasn't just, "Oh, I'm gonna follow the trail of Jep," right? Because obviously, as fun as it would have been to have Jep and Bear and Amy together, which I think is probably the fun trio story that's actually happening here, like mom and dad and then their angry stepdaughter,
Yeah,
like would be a lot of fun. But I think they wanted to probably give her a little bit more of like a thing. The problem is this episode, they had all the chances in the world to like establish her more as a character, and we get one scene where it's like her and Saved by the Bell, they're like down by this river, chilling, doing what teens do. I figured they were gonna like make out or something, or he was gonna try to make out with her or something. She was gonna be like, absolutely not. I'm trying to just find my little brother friend. Um, but instead they're just like ripped to the end of the world, like ripped to the human race. I guess that's it. It's like, oh my gosh, is this how Gen Z kids think all the time? Like
no, I think they're
that
a little more proactive.
Yeah, so, I don't know. They end up joining the Last Men because Birdie sees it, or excuse me, not Birdie. Bear sees it as a way to get to Gus because she
Mm.
knows that they're going to go to the zoo, which again makes sense. It's kind of smart. And then Saved by the Bell is like, I actually kind of want to kill this animal army that killed my dad. And it's like, oh snap.
Yeah,
That's going to be a fun reveal later in the game. But I don't know. It did feel just kind of like flat. Like they could have almost given her like a third of an episode in the future, like straight off the bat, and then
right.
had her get to her end point. I don't know. It felt kind of weird. And I know again, they're trying to get everybody in every episode, but like
Yeah,
some stories are stronger than others, and this one was clearly the weak one.
if you're gonna make these episodes like an hour long, you have to make everything in the episode important. Otherwise,
Yeah,
it feels like network TV, and that's kind of what we're trying to get away from. That's why I like these shows because they're not that. So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I guess like outside of the main story, I guess Danny, was there anything else you wanted to cover? Or I guess maybe we can get into our final points of like what was good and what was not so good.
yeah, we can. Let's do that. Let's do that.
All right. Well, I guess for me, the big thing that I really took away from this episode was I liked that Singh got a new lease on life. Like
Hmm.
he discovered his purpose. It felt like he had a renewed sense of purpose, right? He was clearly trying to find a cure. He's been trying to find a cure for forever, and he's had to resort to desperate measures. Seeing Birdie's information, finding these chickens, has given him this renewed spark, and I kind of love it for the character. Like this actor has been nailing it since episode one. But I love to see the range of this guy, where he's been this depressed mess who's desperate for the last half a season, right? In the beginning of this and the end of last season, and now to see him with this like pep in his step is very exciting. I can't wait to see where it goes in episode 4.
No, I agree. I agree. He's just very good at what he's doing. I think him and Gus are like the MVPs of the show. So the
Yeah,
more the
yeah.
more time they spend on screen, especially together, like the more I'll be into the show. Because I know they're the ones that are gonna really propel the story the forward the most. I think.
Mhm. Mhm. What was on your list? Anything else you wanted that was so good?
Yeah, the good stuff. I mean, Peter. I love Peter. I love the introduction of Peter.
Yeah. Oh
And I
man.
hope this show doesn't break my heart with Peter. But yeah, I mean that it's a really fun character. I think a really interesting, also really interesting, just to have all kinds of hybrids. Like we've seen all kinds of hybrids, and I think that's really
Yeah.
cool. And then the other thing, just like getting some answers for the world, and then how everything kind of how we got here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it really puts me a little at ease because my fear with all this stuff is usually that they're not gonna know. I mean, I know the comic's already out there and it's already done, and maybe
Mhm.
Lemire and the showrunners like they've had a chance to maybe correct some of the things that Lemire didn't fully get to the first time around or whatever, or
Hmm.
maybe he saw
Hmm.
something that could have done better or different. So yeah, I that gives me a lot of hope. Like they do have a plan in mind. They know everything. They it feels like they know where they're going, even if
Yeah.
sometimes they take these little detours that maybe you shouldn't. So
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing and one more thing about Peter the Crocodile Kid. This reminded me. This is the first carnivore that we've seen, like strictly carnivore hybrid kid that I think we've seen. Um,
yeah, yeah, I
if
think so.
I'm
I
not
think
mistaken.
going through the roster of the kids,
Yeah,
um, and yeah, I think so, which is interesting.
yeah. It kind of led me to wonder about a thing from the comics, but I think I'm gonna wait till episode 4 to see where that goes, to
Okay.
see if that question even needs to be asked.
It
So
reminded me now that you said that, it reminds me a little bit of Beastars, the manga that where they have like the carnivores and the herbivores have to kind of stay in
yeah,
different dorms and stuff. But
yeah. That's a different
yeah,
podcast
that's a
altogether.
completely different show.
So I guess really quick before we wrap up, I guess was there anything that was not so good that you wanted to call out? I think we both agreed the whiplash of this episode was in all over the place with the threads was kind of a lot. But was there anything else?
No, it was really the lack of bear, and I feel like I said, some of the factory town stuff just it didn't fully make sense, but it also feels like maybe they didn't do much to it. Like the place
Hmm.
looks cool, but it just like it doesn't feel like there's no rules to it, which I know it's a post-apocalyptic society, but we need a little bit of structure if you're gonna have some good storytelling and world building.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I think the weird part where like of Jep saying, "Hold on, I know these guys," and then they're immediately dead is kind of like a weird like bad writing thing. But maybe there was a reason for it.
but then yeah, but then Amy, like, she has somebody to call to as well. Like, why didn't she bring that up earlier? Like, they
Yeah.
need to communicate better. I think that's the main point here.
Right. It's not bad writing, it's bad communication on part of the characters. I
That's
see,
right.
cool. Um, well, cool. Well, Danny, this is a blast. Episode 3 of season 2 has been great. I mean, I overall like this episode. I think the Gus and the Sing stuff, top tier. This is
Yeah.
what we came for here for in the first place. So, really great. But I guess to wrap things up, you can always check us out on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Discord, Goodreads. We got a YouTube. All the links are in our show notes. Please subscribe, like, fave, join our reading club. It's amazing. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast to get early access to episodes like this, Candybar Antlerboy, as well as the main feed, plus a plenty of other stuff, a better Batmobile, IRCB Movie Club, and so much more. IRCB Candy Bar logo was done by the Sam DS. Lincoln's in the show notes for their work. Music for this episode is Beautiful CS by Robert Farmer. I want to say thank you to Danny for this episode. Thank you to the folks over at Netflix and Jeff Lemire, a personal friend, for making this show possible. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.